I want to hear cannons. Snap to Brady. Brady looking. He may run. Brady has got a hurdle. He's got a first down inside the 25, and he slides at the 22.
He's fired up.
Tom Brady runs for a first down. Here's the snap. Brady hands the ball off, running to the left. It's Fournette inside the 25. Stiff arm to the 20. On his feet to the 15, 10, 5, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Leonard Fournette. Touchdown, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Wow, is that the dagger? I hope so, with 20 seconds left.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I am your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucksNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. Joining us today, our very special friends from the Bring the Juice podcast, ready to help us break down the third and final preseason game before the 2022 NFL season between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Indianapolis Colts. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek Larger and Cody Felger, thank you guys for making time with us today. And we collabed with one of you last year for the game preview, and this year we've got both. I'm pretty sure we're making show history today because we're almost 300 episodes into this thing. And I don't think we've ever had more than 3 people on the podcast at a time. So so thank you guys for joining us today.
Absolutely. Love to be here.
Yep. Good to be back, man.
Absolutely. So I got to tell you, before we really get into the game, I want to preface things. I don't know if you guys have felt like this, but this preseason in particular has just reminded me how much I despise the NFL preseason. I know that might come off as a little bit harsh, but for a lot of Bucs fans, I'm sure that they feel my pain when you lose Ryan Jensen in the first week of practice. And then on top of that, it seems like the past couple of weeks, the Bucs haven't been able to shake the injury bug. You look at this game in Indy, and a part of me wants to get excited because, yeah, Tom Brady's back with the team. We're going to see the first team offense, most of the starters out there for the first time this preseason on Saturday night. But I mean, God, dude, I just want to get through this game and be healthy. And on top of that, the whole 11-day Brady absence, the news cycle each and every day. I mean, every single person on the internet who covers football having an opinion about your team, it's almost draining. Like, I hate to say it like that, but man, I am just ready for the preseason to be over. But Evan, where are you sitting right now as far as, you know, getting ready for the game on Saturday night and hoping to roll into week 1 against Dallas fully healthy?
No, yeah, I think I definitely agree with the whole sentiment that you want to see the starters, but you want to guarantee that, like, okay, no more starters are going to go down, because especially at certain positions, because obviously we'll get into the Colts, but for the Bucs' sake, they can't. I mean, Todd Bowles even admitted it. They can't afford another injury on the offensive line. They really can't afford it. So obviously Aaron Stinney went down versus Tennessee. He's out for the season. Ryan Jensen, while he's not officially out for the season, sounds like he's going to be out for probably 90% of the season if he can return at all. They really can't afford it anymore. So while you're excited to see Tom Brady and Mike Evans and Julio Jones and all these guys, you do want them to stay healthy. That's the number one priority. It doesn't matter about individual stats or winning the game. That goes for both teams. I don't think neither really team cares about winning or losing the game. You just, at this point, especially this close to the regular season, you just want to be as healthy as possible heading into week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that sentiment. I mean, unfortunately, in the preseason, we see it every year. There is one team that always gets hit with the injury bug before the season starts. Last year, it was the Ravens when they lost both their corners and lost J.K. Dobbins in the first couple weeks of training camp. And unfortunately, that's kind of what's happening right now at Tampa. Certainly hope you guys don't lose any more offensive linemen, because we saw what that happened with the Eagles when that happened for them in 2020. I mean, their season went down the drain because they couldn't protect anybody. You know, certainly hope that, God forbid, anybody else on that offensive line gets hurt. As long as it's not Tristan Wirfs, then you guys will be okay regardless, because Wirfs one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. But yeah, I mean, it is getting that close to time. You know, I agree with you, Rhett, that it's getting to the point where I just want the regular season to start now. Like I enjoy the preseason content. Of course, it's warming you up, but like, man, dude, I'm waiting for football to just be back. And with college football knocking on the door as well, I'm like, dude, just bring me some NFL football for goodness sake. I just want to freaking get into this season and see where the Colts are at this point.
Yeah, it's always nice to talk about preseason because, again, it does warm you up for the season. It's nice to see the starters take the field. Like, when you think about it, this Saturday night is going to be the first time we've seen Tom Brady take the field as a Buc since January, almost 7-8 months ago at this point.
And after that crazy offseason as well.
I know, man, with everything coming together the way that it did, retiring for 40 days, coming back, getting the team together, rolling out there with a new offensive unit for the most part. I mean,
this offseason's been a crazy one for you guys, for sure.
Man, that's why I'm saying, like, I'm so excited for football to start mattering for real. Because I'm just tired. I feel tired from this offseason. Like, so much has happened. They've dominated the news cycle, and that's more than fine because, I mean, once Tom Brady's out of here, this level of news coverage is never going to come back. Like, unless we end up with an aging Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow somewhere down the line, I can't imagine the Bucs in a position over the next 10 to 15 years to be dominating SportsCenter, ESPN, everything the way that they are right now. But yeah, I'm ready to get out of the preseason. Everybody has an opinion on your team. Everybody has an opinion on your quarterback, especially when he takes a week and a half off in the middle of training camp. But once these games start counting for real and you can stack up some W's, it seems like opinions change and people seem to ground themselves just a little bit more because I know you guys are familiar with the Twitter sphere. I don't know if Indy Twitter gets quite as toxic and bad as Tampa Bay has these past few seasons. But man, after watching Kyle Trask not have the best game in the world against Tennessee, you would have thought the Bucs were winning 5-6 games this year. It's actually incredible, depending on who you talk to. But let's go ahead and get into what we're going to be looking out for in this Saturday night's game up there in Lucas Oil Stadium. Beautiful stadium, by the way, man.
Yes,
I mean, that game day experience is pretty unreal. I know there's a lot to do in Indy. I got a good look at it. Our buddy James went up there for the combine, and he sent me a bunch of video. And it's just a really, really cool place to be, that whole hustle and bustle of everything around there. But let's talk about coming into the game. For the Buccaneers, it's obvious, and a lot of people are going to want to focus on this more than anything because once they're off of the field, they may turn the game off. But the starters, as far as Indy goes, I don't know if you guys have played many of your starters on either side of the ball. The Bucs starters have not seen very much action. I think partially because, the coaching staff has been a little bit hesitant trying to hold off those injuries and make sure they give a couple of extra vet days out. But you're going to see Tom Brady. You're going to see Julio Jones. You're going to see a lot of this first-team offense. And rookie guard Luke Gedeke is going to be getting the nod there at the left guard position. Evan, is there anything else that you're really looking at coming into this game? And then after Evan, I wanted to get your guys' thoughts at what you're looking at with Indy.
So the big note here with Gedeke is that this is his second straight start with the first team. I know in versus Tennessee wasn't really the first team, but he started the game. Obviously the two that you're looking at are Gedeke and then Robert Hainsey, because this is going to be the first time that you're seeing Robert Hainsey snap the ball to Tom Brady in an actual game situation. So that'll be curious to see. And then I think you're going to see most of the first team defense. We talked about the injuries that Tampa has suffered. A lot of them have been on the offensive side of the ball. And fortunately, the defense has remained, knock on wood here, but the defense has remained relatively healthy. So they're a pretty healthy group, and a lot of them are going to play on Saturday night. So I'm curious to see how they look as well. There's a lot of new pieces on this defense with Akeem Hicks, Logan Ryan, Keanu Neal. There's a lot of different pieces that they're trying to fit in here, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So, like you said, I'm cautiously excited to see the starters, just because one play can, you never know. Injuries can happen at any point, and one play can sort of change your mood on whether you want the starters to be out there or not.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Derek.
I was just going to say really quick, one position as far as the starters on offense, I don't think he's going to be starting, but a guy who is certainly in a bit of a predicament coming into this game, and I wanted to transition with this. I've always heard the Colts are labeled as, a wide receiver needy team this time of year. A lot of options I see are talking about bringing guys to Indy, and I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on someone like Scotty Miller, who very well may be playing his last game as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer this weekend, just because of that wide receiver battle the thought of whether the Bucs are going to carry 6 or 7 into the regular season. But yeah, I mean, for Scotty, he's obviously want to go out there and perform. But are you guys paying attention to a Scotty Miller for Tampa Bay just in case you're looking to add a piece like that, because he is going to be cheap?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's one that I'm looking at, like him. And I know Derek doesn't really like Denzel Mims a whole lot, but, a couple guys like that are kind of on the fringe of the roster, but I think are supremely talented, if given the right opportunity. And, I think the Colts got a little bit of more answers in the last preseason game for kind of that number 5 and number 6 wide receiver, depending on how many they do carry. But I do feel like they would, be in the market for looking for another wide receiver because, it still is a competition at this point. And I think definitely adding a guy like Scotty Miller would not be a bad option at all. I really do think just because of how stacked, honestly, the Bucs wide receiver core is, I think, the Colts could find a really good guy there. I personally still do think that wide receiver is in contention for the Colts to try to find somebody off the waiver wire.
And it's funny too, because I actually was friends with Scotty Miller in school. He was from BG, so I'm from B. I went to BG as well. I knew Scotty Miller, talked with him a lot when he was coming up into the scene at college. I mean, he was a stud. Talked with him a couple times, had a couple classes with him, so we were definitely talking for quite a while. But yeah, I mean, it's been awesome to see Scotty Miller do what he did for you guys for a long time. And I'd love to have Scotty Miller because of what he is. He's just a speed demon right off the edge. But at the same time, I think the Colts, what they're kind of looking for right now is more of a slot receiver. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's in Scotty Miller's repertoire. I don't know if Scotty Miller's he's more of that run and gun on the outside because that's what his speed is able to do for you. I just don't know if we need another one of those because the Colts already have 3 of them. So I don't know if we really need another one of those. But again, you never know when it comes to this business. So we'll see. I mean, it all depends on what Chris Ballard's thinking. And every time you try to figure out what Chris Ballard's doing, you just never know. So, I mean, he has a different set of rules in that building than everyone else understands. So if he decides to go with it on that, then what's one more speed demon on the roster?
Well,
Yeah.
the good news is that, if you listen to any national reporter, I guess any white receiver that plays with Tom Brady is just automatically Julian Edelman. So technically, Scotty Miller,
even though Scotty Miller was clearly faster than Julian Edelman, he was a completely different receiver.
And he doesn't play the slot at all. But hey, people are labeling him as a Julian Edelman type. So
it's just like when they tried to label Alec Pierce as Jordy Nelson. It's like, why do we always have to label white receivers after another white receiver?
My big thing.
Go off of different comparisons here.
My big thing pre-draft, every white tight end is just baby Gronk, like every single one.
Every single freaking one.
Oh man, yeah. So that's interesting insight there, and what the Colts could be looking for. Scotty Miller, he's made some memorable plays for the Bucs, but he's also gotten lost in the shuffle, just like you guys said, with how it's kind of the nature of the beast, how deep the Buccaneers wide receiver room is. And when they add a guy like Julio Jones and they add Russell Gage, you're looking at it and you're saying, well, like they're going to have to get rid of 1 or 2 really talented players. And unfortunately, it's looking more and more likely that Scotty Miller could be that guy.
Yeah.
Now, as far as, guys that surprise you coming into this game, the one that I'm looking at on the defensive side of the ball for Tampa Bay is a linebacker by the name of Olakunte Fadakazi. I think I said that correctly.
Even, during the season, if he makes a team, which I think he will, I'm not even going to say it. His nickname is 03, so that's what I'm calling him.
Yeah, well, 03 has seemingly come out of nowhere, man. Over the first 2 weeks of the preseason, he is leading the team in tackles. Both of those games led the defense in tackles. And yeah, when you're on the edge like he is, you're going to see the most playing time, but he is certainly making the most of it. Now, my question for you guys, and Cody, you can go first. Are there any guys on the Colts roster so far this preseason that have really kind of jumped out to you and you frankly didn't see them coming?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys that kind of come to mind. I think, if we stay with the linebackers, we have a couple of those undrafted linebackers that I think have really stood out. JoJo Doman and then Sterling Weatherford both have been guys that are fighting for that, kind of back into the roster there. But I feel like they've both performed extremely well. I would say as well, just a guy that has really surprised us, not because, he wasn't like people don't know who he is, but I think just because we just didn't know what we were going to get because he is a rookie. That's Nick Cross. I think Nick Cross, he's penciled in as your starter at strong safety. And that is, competing with a guy like Rodney McLeod, who is, I think, a really good safety in this league. Nick Cross has kind of come out of nowhere. And I think he's shown just his ability already. I mean, he started in camp. It was like the first day of camp, he had an interception, so it seems like every single opportunity that Nick Cross has been given, he has just honestly just excelled at that, and we didn't know because he was a 3rd round pick. Sometimes those guys can take a little bit of time to develop, but Nick Cross, credit him, and we'll see. I think this will be a good test for him on Saturday, but so far so good for Nick Cross.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Cross was certainly one that was crazy. I mean, we looked at his draft profile, and it's amazing that he even fell to the 3rd round to begin with. I mean, I think it's because he's only 20 years old, but he's runs a 4.3. He has a 38-inch vertical. His agility numbers were the best of all the safeties in the draft, but yet athletically, this guy is amazing. And it's like a wonder how he even fell that far. So it is crazy to see him there. And, a couple guys in the secondary as well. We've talked about some guys like Dallas Flowers, who's another undrafted free agent, might round out the back end of this roster as well. And one guy on the offensive line that Cody and I are going to be looking at is a guy by the name of Will Fries. He was a rookie last year, 2nd-year player this year. And since our center, Ryan Kelly, is out in this game because of COVID, Danny Pinter is going to be taking his spot at center. So Will Fries is going to be moving to the guard position. And I think Cody and I were talking about it last night of, Danny Pinter has not been doing very well as a starter at the guard position throughout camp. He's had some setbacks compared to 2021. We thought he did really, really well, but in camp this year, he seems to struggle a little bit. And we've seen Will Fries actually improve a ton. And he was a 7th round draft pick from 2021. And now he's going to be the first guy off the bench for anyone this year. So, I mean, Will Fries, I'm excited to see what he does against, your guys' defensive line, who obviously has Vita Vea, Akeem Hicks, guys who are big, powerful men in there. So it will be interesting to see how this Colts offensive line, particularly Will Fries, will handle against your guys' defensive line.
Will Fries is the other half of French.
Yeah, Wesley French and Will Fries. Yep,
that picture was, making the rounds.
That was the meme. Yep, everybody watches it.
Well, I'll tell you this, it'll be interesting too, because from what we understand, if he's rolling out there with the starters, you're going to get a good look at him, because I think there was a headline I saw that said Indy is planning to play most of their starters for most of the first half of the game. Yeah. I mean, you've got your bigger names like Jonathan Taylor is going to sit. Naheem Hines, I think they said wasn't going to play either.
Yeah.
But as far as Tampa Bay goes, I know we touched on the starters at the beginning of the show, but Evan, I'm going to be honest with you, at least on the offensive side of the ball with Tom Brady, maybe you see Kyle Trask throw to some starters. Like maybe this is that week. But I think as far as, the starters on the offensive side of the ball go for Tampa Bay, I want to believe that like a quarter max, and then you get them out of there. I don't know. What are you thinking? Because Bowles hasn't given us much indication other than whoever's healthy is going to play. But how long they're going to play, I don't know.
Yeah, he hasn't given any indication how long they're going to play. I would guess, I think a quarter is fair. I still think they want to get a good look at Kyle Trask, and I don't think they're completely done looking at Kyle Trask.
This is the last week you're going to be able to do it for a while.
Let me tell you something.
We had the Colts. The Colts starters are going to be in for at least the first half.
Okay.
So, I mean, does Todd Bowles kind of do a mutual, the Colts starters are going to stay in mano-a-mano here. Let's kind of go one half to see just where we match up. I mean, is that a possibility?
Yeah, it might be. But they might want to see how Trask looks against the starting defense. If all the starting pieces with Trask, a lot of your Trask defenders out there, a lot of your Trask haters will say he's just not good, but a lot of your Trask defenders will say, well, look at the talent that he's playing with most of the time. A quick note: how would you like to be Ryan Griffin? The Bucs' fourth string quarterback has not played a single minute, a single second.
He's normally Mr. August.
Games. Yeah, I mean, that shines.
Yeah, that's his nickname. The past 8 seasons in Tampa Bay, he has been Mr. August.
He has not played a single snap, and he's getting paid like $1 million. It's just he's getting paid to practice. Like it's beautiful. But anyways, I think they're going to keep giving Kyle Trask every opportunity. And, like I said, your Trask defenders will say, look at the talent he's playing with. He's not playing with a Mike Evans. He's not playing with a Julio Jones. He's not the first team offensive line isn't protecting him. That was a big deal last week. The offensive line struggled last week. A lot of the backups.
I'll tell you this too, just to kind of add on to what you're saying. As far as the offensive line goes, if they plan to roll Kyle Trask out there without the starting offensive line in the second quarter, it's going to be a lot of what we saw against Tennessee last week.
Yeah, but the same offensive line was there versus Miami. Like they just didn't play well.
That Colts starting defense in the first quarter against Buffalo forced 3 turnovers in the first quarter. This Colts defense, his first team defense, is really legit. So yeah, if you guys only play him for a quarter and Kyle Trask is out there with the backups for that, yeah, he's gonna get absolutely destroyed by Yannick Ngakoue and Kwity Paye off the edge. Or DeForest Buckner might just flatten him at that point.
Yeah, that's what I was at. Yeah, if Buckner was playing, that might not be too fun for him. But like I said, I think you'll see a little bit of start. I don't know if the Bucs starters will play the whole first half. I do think they'll play at least a quarter, but I do think they still want to get a good look at Kyle Trask. So I think you could see Kyle Trask maybe towards the end of the first half. Maybe that's Blaine Gabbert, and they see Kyle Trask the rest of the way. But I do expect to see a lot of Kyle Trask, and I still think Indy, even with their depth, like Indy's a good football team, so they got good depth, and that could be a good challenge for Trask, even if you're playing the third quarter. Like I think this is a team that has depth, so like you're playing in the third quarter, but a lot of those guys are quality NFL players, so I think you could get a pretty good look at Trask there, and he's had a lot of positives from week 1, and we didn't talk really about week 2, but week 2 wasn't that great. And was it some of the offensive line? Yes, but it was also on him a little bit as well, holding the ball too long, not making the quick decisions that he needs to. And hopefully he shows progress in that area on Saturday night.
Talking about the quarterback position, I wanted to ask you guys, are you excited about Matt Ryan? I'm not too sure what you've seen from him this season. But this is the first time he's going to be playing Tom Brady since they squared off in Tampa. What was it, week 18 last year?
It was in Atlanta. It was like mid-season. No, it wasn't that late.
Oh, I'm thinking they played Atlanta late. I mean, literally, I think the past 3 out of 4 years, the Bucs have played the Falcons at home.
They normally do. This year was
last game of the year.
Last year it was the Panthers.
Yeah, but what do you guys think about Matt Ryan? I mean, he's definitely a guy who can sling it. During his time in Atlanta, he was always putting up good yardage against Tampa Bay. Didn't always win the game, but he was certainly not the problem on offense as far as it goes in Atlanta. I'm excited to see what he can do up there at Indy. I know we won't see a whole lot of him. I mean, at most one half this Saturday night. But what are your guys' thoughts? You think he can kind of be that guy to get you over the hump?
Yeah, I mean, I think about like Carson Wentz last year, and I think in that Tampa Bay game he played decently well from what I can remember. He had a few issues, but you just look at just the upgrade. I think we could say it's a pretty significant upgrade over Carson Wentz this year, just because of what he does, on and off the field, right? I mean, my goodness, Matt Ryan, even before training camp was starting, he was like quizzing guys in the hallway. He was doing these things, being that pro that we all know Matt Ryan is. And, I think that's just what the Colts locker room needed. They needed that mature guy in there that was going to command the locker room, command the huddle, and do those things. And yeah, you guys are right. Like, Matt Ryan never was the problem in Atlanta the last couple of years. It was just the talent around him or lack thereof. So I am very excited to add a Matt Ryan into this team, and has now a really good running game to complement him. He has a number 1 wide receiver in Michael Pittman, and a couple of young guys that you're excited about, like Alec Pierce and all those guys. And he also has a defense, maybe for the first time in a long time. So all that to say, I do think Matt Ryan is, I think that that marriage the Colts have with Matt Ryan for at least the next 2 years. I think it's a good one. And honestly, thinking about the future of this team at quarterback, it's kind of maybe in a similar sense to where you guys are with Tom Brady and Kyle Trask, is like, hopefully in the next year or two, the Colts are going to look to find their future at quarterback, and to have a guy in there that's, borderline Hall of Fame, I think it's going to go a long way for whoever comes in next. But as it stands for the immediate future, I definitely think it's a major upgrade for what the Colts want to do. And honestly brings guys some stability to that quarterback position that honestly the Colts haven't had since Andrew Luck retired. And that goes a long way, I think, for the locker room as well to feel that.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Ryan I could argue this is probably the best roster that Matt Ryan has ever had from a player talent standpoint. Even when he went to the Super Bowl in 2017, or it was 2018, can't remember which year that was. But nevertheless, I mean, even that team that he had, even with Julio Jones as potentially the best wide receiver in the game, didn't even have a roster as good as he has now when it comes to overall players and everything. You can argue Shanahan better coach than Reich at this moment, but he's walking in, like Cody said, this is the best defense that he's ever had on the opposite side of him. He's got an offensive line now that for many years he never had reliance upon. He's got the best running back in the NFL. So, there's a lot of great things for him to feel like he doesn't have to be something more than what he is. And I think he enjoys that. But I think going off of the leadership standpoint, Nyheim Hines raves about what Matt Ryan has been like for this team already. He says literally he gets chills every time listening to Matt Ryan in the huddle. Like, it seems so surreal. It's like he's like almost like you're talking to a legend. It's kind of one of those situations where you shut up and you listen, you look and you listen, you pay attention to what he's saying. He has that kind of charisma that brings you in as a unit, which, like Cody said, we haven't had that since Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck was significant, but obviously Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, and Carson Wentz all didn't have that kind of charisma to bring it together quite like that. And obviously it's still too premature. We don't know how he's going to look. Obviously this wide receiver corp is kind of, young. It's really young right now. So he's going to have to mold them into shape, but I do feel confident that he has the ability to get us into the playoffs. And I have a extreme confidence that this team's not going to falter in the big moments like it did last year under the helm of Matt Ryan.
Right. And I don't know how old he is off the top of my head, but
37.
37. Okay. So as far as the Bucs quarterback situation goes, it seems like the entire league and then some is fully aware that it is year to year for us right now. Like,
I mean, the Colts basically got a young player compared to the Bucs.
Yeah, right. I mean, 37 is still pretty spry, and it's going to tie into the question I'm about to ask. But like I said, as far as Tom Brady, it is very much year to year. We thought he retired for 40 days. He comes back, and everybody wants to assume this is his last year. I think most of us think that this is more than likely his last year, but like,
you never know.
I think there's just as much of a chance that at 46 years old, he's like, yeah, let's go do this thing again, especially if they don't get the Super Bowl this season. But with Matt Ryan, do you see a situation where, he does end up being your guy's quarterback for the next 2, 3, 4 years? Maybe he plays well enough this year to lock up a 2 or 3 year contract. Because I know you would mention that sooner or later, you're going to want to look to the future. And I know this is a quarterback rich draft coming up. But if Matt Ryan balls out and you guys make a deep playoff run and at 38 years old, he feels good enough to keep going, do you still feel confident? Like, do you see a scenario where Matt Ryan can finish up his career in Indy, but do it by playing maybe another 4 or 5 years at this point? I know it seems like a stretch, but his arm doesn't look like it's slowing down just yet. And that starts to become the major topic once any quarterback gets over 35 years old, it seems like.
Yeah, 4 to 5 years seems a little too much. You never try to think that that's going to happen because, Brady's one of the only guys that's ever actually been able to pull that off. But, Matt Ryan, he's been an Iron Man throughout his career. I think he's missed 3 or 4 games in his entire 14-year career.
And he got his ass kicked in Atlanta behind that offensive line. Week in and week out, multi-sack games, especially those last few years he was there, they were dreadful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that he never missed games, just goes to show you how well he takes care of his body. And, you're right. Like the arm hasn't really disappeared that much. I mean, some people try to nitpick, but he can still throw a 50-yarder down the field easy, no problem whatsoever. So, he says he feels great and that he still loves this game and wants to continue to play. And, Ballard and Reich and even the Colts owner, Jim Irsay, said, 2-3 years definitely is not out of the question. We definitely believe that Matt Ryan can be this team's quarterback for at least a couple years. And that's great because even if the Colts decide to bet their future on, say, with this quarterback heavy class that we're about to have, say the Colts say we're going to give up a ton of draft capital to go to get the quarterback that we know will be the future in like a year or two from now, then great. You can sit him behind Matt Ryan, who you still feel confident is going to mold him into where you think you're going to be. Most of your players will still be in their prime. You feel confident where the roster is, and then you feel like you can try to replicate kind of what the Kansas City Chiefs did with Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. You hope that that's the case. Obviously, don't think another quarterback's going to quite be like Patrick Mahomes right away, but yeah, I do believe the Colts think that Matt Ryan can stick around for at least 2 years, possibly 3. And it gives you some leeway to figuring out what kind of position you have with this quarterback. It gives them some time, some breathing room to know that if something doesn't go their way, they feel confident that it's not going to ruin their season if they don't get one.
Yeah. And the Colts are not going to force it. I'll just say that right now. Like they are a team, like a lot of teams, it seems like you see around draft time and stuff, it seems like they force picks, they panic, they make kind of a panic pick. And that's something the Colts system will never do. Like under Chris Ballard, they will never force a pick. And so I think, yeah, you're right there. He gives you a little bit of leverage that, okay, at least for this season and next season, Matt Ryan is under contract with this team. So, we can get a quarterback this next year in the draft. And we can have him sit behind Matt Ryan for 1, maybe 2+ years, and we feel good about it. But hey, if it's not in the right position, we feel like, we still have a couple more years of good football on Matt Ryan. Maybe they do go and kind of take a swing at the fences a little bit and they go at other players outside of quarterback. Like I could see a scenario where that does happen. But I think for me, I would rather if you fall in love with a guy this year, you have the capital to go get it, because the Colts did with the Carson Wentz trade. They actually got a conditional third that could turn into a second if Carson Wentz plays a certain amount of snaps. So you go into this offseason with, 3 picks inside of the first 2 rounds. And it's like, okay, that could be helpful in terms of trying to find some ammunition to move up and get your guy. But,
and you have your future first rounders as well, Cody. I mean,
exactly.
They're willing to give those up as well if that's what it takes.
Yeah, you got whatever you need. I feel like the Colts are in a good position now where they don't have to rush and force that pick. But also, it's like they don't have to force it, but they can, if they have to. The roster's good enough if you don't have, some higher picks. And especially with, some of the success that Chris Ballard has found in those mid to late rounds, you'll probably get a few guys that contribute as well as, free agency as well. So, yeah, all that to say, feeling good about where we're at with Matt Ryan. And, at the very least, you at least get 2 good years out of him, and maybe potentially a mentor to your future at quarterback.
And I feel like the Colts are one of those teams, like obviously with the whole Andrew Luck thing and everything, ever since then, they haven't had that franchise guy. Like they haven't had like that guy that is going to be there for, this guy's the guy for 10 years. It was Luck, then Brissett, then Rivers, then, Wentz, then Ryan. So, I think whenever, you talk about, going out and getting that guy. And that's the reason why I think we're talking about this is like, I think the Bucs, even though they have Kyle Trask, like I know this is a real sidebar and we'll get back to the actual game here in a second, but it wouldn't shock me if they were to explore something like that, because if they don't believe in Kyle Trask, like if you don't think Kyle Trask can win, is just like the Colts, the Buccaneers still have a roster and they're still going to have that roster next year that is ready to win. It's not a roster that's set for a rebuild yet. So if you don't believe in Kyle Trask, then why are you going to waste time? Why waste the season of Mike Evans' prime, Chris Godwin's prime, Tristan Wirfs' prime? Why waste those guys' seasons if you don't believe in the quarterback? So I think the Bucs could pull off something similar in the draft to sort of mortgage the future. The Bucs haven't done that like in their history. Like they haven't made like that bold of a move. to move up in the draft like that, because it's going to take, I think the Bucks and Colts are both going to be picking in the mid to late 20s. So it's going to take a lot to move up, but I think both those teams, when talking about the quarterbacks, I think both those teams are in a pretty similar boat.
I hate to bring up some negative memories here, but can you believe it's only been 3 years since the Andrew Luck thing? Like
feels so much longer.
Dude, it feels like it was like 6 or 7 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
I saw a post the other day that said 3 years ago today, Andrew Luck announces his retirement. And I was like, there is no goddamn way that was only 3 seasons ago. It certainly feels like you guys have had a quarter of all the quarterbacks in the league come and pass through there these past couple of seasons with Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, now Matt Ryan as well. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like 3 years.
No. And I'll give the Colts credit. We've been competitive in that time somehow.
Oh, yeah.
Without a franchise quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, we took a swing at Carson Wentz, didn't work out. So, I'm glad. And honestly, I feel like somehow we got out of that relatively unscathed, all things considered, which is crazy.
I think at the time, people had taken the initial press conference talking about how you're moving on. People had kind of taken that at face value and said, oh, that's a little stiff towards a guy like Carson Wentz. But to be honest with you, it seems like it was the right attitude to have at the time, because you made it clear that not only do the Colts have a damn good roster on both sides of the ball, like you don't want to waste those guys' seasons, just like we were talking about with a lot of the pieces on the Bucs roster with the inevitable retirement of Tom Brady coming up soon. But I mean, Carson Wentz was a 1-year experiment. You wanted to try it out and see if it worked, found out it did not work. And they didn't make the mistake of trying to hang on to that one season too long. So if I have to give Indy credit on one thing, it's just how they handled that entire situation. Like, yeah, maybe there were some hurt feelings about it, but at the end of the day, it's about winning football games. And getting away from Carson Wentz when you did, I think was the right move that they needed to continue to try and win some more football games here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how much of an improvement it was. I mean, we get the backlash from everyone, right? Like, we try to be as split on this as possible. Like, we're not trying to blame it all on Carson Wentz, because the entire team fumbled, the coaching staff fumbled, the management staff fumbled, the whole organization as a whole fumbled the end of last season. It was not all on Carson Wentz, but and it's no doubt, I mean, everyone saw the same thing. Those last 5 games, the man was throwing for 150 passing yards a game. He was throwing just as many interceptions as he was touchdowns. And his QBR was a 4.7 against Jags. You cannot end your season like that. You cannot.
And it was a playing game too, right?
Like that. What's up?
It was a playing game too, right? You win and you're in?
Yeah.
Man,
yeah,
listen,
so that was it. The last 2 weeks, it wasn't even just the Jags. We had the Raiders and the Jags. We win one of those 2 games, we're in. The Raiders don't make it, and the Raiders are just like, thanks, Colts, so very much. Like, that was it, because then we lose the Jags game. Whoever won the Chargers versus the Raiders gets in because of that.
I gotta tell you, I mean, it's been a minute. Don't get me wrong. 2019, when we finished the year 7-9 off of the pick 6, that was rough. It was bad. You knew we weren't going to be missing the playoffs anyways or going to the playoffs anyways after we had lost to Houston. But I feel your pain. I mean, just a late season collapse with a talented roster. I think about 2016, the Bucs were 8-5, and then they finished the year 9-7, I think, Evan, and then missed the playoffs. That was the one like glory year under Cutter. Jameis had played a pretty good game. Keith Tandy had called game 2 weeks in a row. And then you think back, was it 2008 when they started 9-3 and still missed the playoffs?
Yeah, that was Gruden's last year.
Yeah, man. I mean, those late season collapses, they'll haunt you for a very long time. But I think the Colts have still got a pretty damn good roster, and you guys are set to win some more games this year. They're going to be a fun team to watch for sure. As we wrap up the conversation on the quarterback position, I wanted to get back to Kyle Trask really quickly, Evan, and kind of get your thoughts about what your expectations are for him on Saturday night's game. As I alluded to before, going to be the last time we get to see him suit up for this long for a while, at least until next preseason, it seems, unless the worst possible case scenario happens. So what are your biggest takeaways from Trask so far? And what do you want to see the most from him on Saturday night? Is he probably going to get a majority of the playing time at the QB position?
Yeah, obviously after the Miami game, I praised him. I thought he looked good, thought he made a lot of throws with anticipation and looked comfortable. And Tennessee was kind of the opposite. It looked like all night he wasn't really comfortable. A lot of that was because of the offensive line, but some of it was because, like I mentioned earlier, it's just he's holding on to the ball too long. His processing isn't quick enough right now for the NFL game. He had, I think, 2 fumbles. One was lost, or I think he actually got both of them back. But he had 2 fumbles. Got to have more pocket awareness, I think, and you got to be able to move inside the pocket. I think that's a big deal. You see Brady, he's able to climb the pocket. Obviously, we know, he's not fast, but he's able to climb the pocket and avoid the pressure. That makes a great quarterback there when you're able to move inside the pocket, not just scramble out. And I think Trask needs to do a better job of that. Like I said, some of the receivers didn't do him any help. He had a nice deep ball to Scotty Miller, which was dropped. Probably should have. It was a tough catch, but one you probably should have come down with. And I just think overall for Saturday night, you just want to see more comfortableness. You want to see him just play better. I mean, you have to just play better. You don't want to end the preseason on a sour note like that, because like you said, most likely, unless some bad things happen, or like week 18, the Bucs have it all wrapped up and they just start Kyle Trask to start him. This is likely the last time you're going to see Kyle Trask in a game until next preseason, in which the next preseason he might be battling for the starting quarterback job. So you really want to get a good look at him and a positive look, I think, because if it's bad, that could leave a sour taste in your mouth, and that may impact the future of what they determine to do with the quarterback position this offseason, because I think it's most likely Tom Brady's final year. Obviously, never say never, but I think they could be looking for a different quarterback, and this is a huge game for Trask here. So we'll see what happens. He doesn't have to be perfect. You got to show progression, and that's the biggest thing right now. And he hasn't yet. It's been some good, but it's been some bad. It's been a lot of inconsistencies, and you're hoping that he can find that consistency somewhere in this game.
Cody and Derek, what are you guys looking for the most from Indianapolis in this Saturday night's game? Whether it's a certain position group, a certain player in particular, what do you want to take away from this one when it's all said and done?
Cody, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, some guys that we're watching at, and actually, funny enough, we just uploaded a podcast earlier today, this afternoon. But a couple players that I think we're watching, I don't want to talk about all of them, but I think Alec Pierce, the rookie wide receiver out of Cincinnati, he's had some nice moments. Seems like he's starting to come into his own a little bit. He had a really awesome catch. He only, the starters only played a little bit in the last game, but, he had a really cool catch where, he made a cool play to get a first down, and seems like he's just continuing to grow and progress. And so he's a guy that I'm definitely watching. Definitely going to be watching, like we talked about earlier, some of those interior offensive linemen, Will Fries, Danny Pinter, kind of what they're going to do. And I think the last thing for me is going to be just the defensive line. In particular, some of those key backup guys, because we already know DeForest Buckner, we already know Yannick Ngakoue, what we're getting with those guys. But with Kwity Paye being out of this game, most likely because of the injury, I'm really looking forward to guys like Dayo Adangbo, who had 2 sacks against Detroit. Like, what does he look like? What are some of these other young pass rushers like Ben Banogu, Ifeadi Odangbo, some of those guys? How do they, do they provide the pressure that they've been able to do the last couple weeks? Because Tampa Bay does have some nice pieces on that offensive line. I just want to see kind of what that looks like for them, and even some of those interior backup defensive linemen as well, who really did struggle the week ago against Detroit, especially against the run. Can they have some nice bounce back games as well?
Yeah, what I'm looking at is basically all offensive right now. I really want to see the Colts starters without Jonathan Taylor try to find some kind of consistency. We saw that against Tampa Bay the last time we played you guys. I mean, for the first half, the passing offense for us was actually working very well, and we didn't run the ball for quite a while there. And, the offense was moving very well just after a few turnovers and such, just kind of turned things the different direction. But this offseason, we really haven't gotten to see a lot of Indianapolis's offense. We've been talking about their defense every week. We talked about the first week, defense in all aspects looked really good, except for like a few plays. Last week, we talked about the defense just not being able to stop the run and the backups and stuff. I'm not too worried about the defense right now. I'm looking more towards, can Matt Ryan find some kind of consistency? Because if you're going to try to find some kind of consistency, you're going to try to find some kind of good ground, what better to do it against than this Tampa Bay defense that's definitely going to give you some problems while you're out there? And how does Matt Ryan handle it? How do the Colts offensive starters handle going up against a solid defense like this? Because we've seen the backups, Sam Ellinger and the second and third string guys has just been lighting it up, but I want to see more from the starters, and I want to see, can they sustain blocks? Can our young wide receivers get open? Can we actually run the ball against the number one rushing defense over the last several years? So, it'll be interesting to see how the Colts starting offense handles things.
You had mentioned
I have one more Colts question. I have one more, and it doesn't have to do with this game at all. It's a fantasy football question.
Okay.
So obviously, Carson Wentz was the quarterback last year. This player did well with Carson Wentz, but I think he could do better. So, are we drafting Michael Pittman Jr. this year, or are we're drafting him? Okay.
There has never been a season where Matt Ryan's had a number one receiver who has had less than 120 targets. Michael Pittman is clear number one. I'm not going to lie to you. He might get 150 plus targets this year. Easy. Like it might be 160, 170 for how he's done. Like him and Matt Ryan have developed a relationship. Pittman has caught 3 times the amount of balls in training camp than any other receiver on this roster from Matt Ryan. He is clearly the head and above everybody else. It is no question he's going to have at least 85 plus catches this year for at least 1,200 plus yards, and is probably going to have a good solid 7-8 touchdowns coming his way. So I do believe that if you're going into a deep draft, some mid-round stuff, maybe even early rounds, like, maybe like 4th or 5th round, would not be a stretch to get Michael Pittman, honestly.
Hey, and by the way, I know we haven't made an official announcement yet, but the Cannon Fire Fantasy League is going to be up and cooking here soon. I feel like I'm in 1,000 fantasy leagues this year. Like we haven't even
I'm in a lot.
We haven't even started the one for the podcast yet, and I've already committed to like 3 or 4, and unfortunately one of them is probably going to, kind of be that league that you forget about every year. But be on the lookout for that. If you guys are listening, we'll post all the information on social media here soon, and we'll be accepting some members for that. But one of the things you had mentioned, and I wanted to kind of wrap up with this before I get your thoughts, Evan, and what you're going to be looking at in this game. Derek, you had mentioned consistency, and I think that's the key word for the Bucs this week at pretty much every position. Like with the starters, you know what you're going to get, but when you look at the second string guys, and for me in particular, when I look at that second team offensive line, that's the position where I want to see the most consistency, because you look at what they were able to do for Kyle Trask in Tennessee, and it really wasn't jack squat. And I mean, they didn't have the strongest game against Miami either. Trask had to do some improvisation. They were a little bit better against their second and third string defensive linemen for Miami, but they just really haven't been good. And for Tampa Bay, who is a team who, as we mentioned at the start of the show, cannot afford to lose another offensive lineman. The only depth pieces right now that you're going to feel comfortable with are not even Luke Gedeke, because he's probably going to be starting, Nick Leverett, who, can play at both center and guard if needed. But with Aaron Stinney going down for the rest of the season, you just brought him back on a 1-year deal. That was part of that depth that padded things out, and it is no longer there. So when you think outside of Nick Leverett, you've got Josh Wells as an extra swing tackle when they need it, but there isn't a lot of strong depth at the offensive line position for Tampa Bay. And if Indianapolis is going to have their starters in for the first half, I'm very interested to see what happens about halfway through the second quarter when I think Tom Brady is no longer on the field, and who they have out there on the offensive line. But I want to see some consistency from that group more than anything else. We know about the wide receivers fighting for roster spots, but outside of that offensive line has to do some good this week. Evan, what are you looking at headed into this game?
Yeah, well, a quick note about the offensive line is even when they're going up against the starting Indy defense, they're still going to be without Tristan most likely. There's not much concern about week one. I just think the Bucs are holding him out. He is an upper body injury, so the Bucs are holding him out. I think for now.
It has been described as.
I believe it's oblique. So Todd Bowles says there's not much concern about week one. It's just I doubt they're going to risk it here in the preseason. So you're likely to see Josh Wells start at right tackle, and that'll be an interesting test because while you're going to have technically four, on Saturday night, the Bucs could have four new starters in there that they did not have last year. That being obviously Josh Wells at right tackle, Shaq Mason at right guard, Robert Hainsey at center, and Luke Gedeke at left guard. So that'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out. But like I said, I want to keep an eye on this defense, and more specifically the secondary, because there's a quiet battle going on for an important position, the cornerback too. Between Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy Bunting. And I like Dean better as a player. I think Dean's better, just naturally. I think he's got the better physical tools. I think he's put better stuff on tape. But again, the issue with Dean and really Murphy Bunting can be the theme of this episode is consistency. A lot of times Dean will look like a top 20 corner for 2-3 weeks at a time. But then there's also 2-3 weeks where he's just getting burned a lot. So if he can put that together, he can win that cornerback 2 job opposite of Carlton Davis. We'll see what happens. I think if you had to point out one weakness that's kind of a concern right now is that the Bucs don't have a solidified number 2 corner. Like why is it basically taking to the last preseason game to figure out a pretty important position? Cornerback 2 in a passing league is, with some of the offenses that you're playing this year, is pretty important. So that's a little bit worrisome that they haven't really decided. Neither guy has taken the reins on that job yet.
And it's also important to mention, too, that for SMB, I mean, this is a new position for him. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience playing outside. I know he got moved around a whole bunch last year, but he only played the second half of the season after, going down with injury week 1 against Dallas. So if he can stay healthy, stay consistent, that's all good and dandy. But yeah, I mean, not only is he fighting for that cornerback 2 spot, but he's doing it with a new position. So that is going to be something to keep an eye on. I think athletically, he has the ability. I mean, we've talked about this before. He isn't quite as athletic as a Jamel Dean, but hopefully this change of scenery is good for him because he was not great playing in the nickel last year. He really was not. He did struggle towards the end of the year, and I know that there were a lot of moving parts there. You didn't get your starting secondary all the way up until the wild card game against the Eagles. So all of that context is important to note, but definitely going to be a lot of eyes on him as he tries to shore up that second cornerback spot. I do think Jamel Dean wins the job, though. If I had to guess.
I think so, too. Yeah.
He's just got the experience, a little bit of the edge there, but it should be fun. Hey, I know it's preseason, but for shits and giggles, let's get a final score prediction. Derek, I'll go to you first, and then Cody, and then Evan, and I'll wrap this thing up.
All right. Let's just say final score 27-24. I'll just say Buccaneers just for the heck of it because the Colts don't care about finishing these games off the way they do. I mean, we've lost the first 2. Should have won against the Lions, but we went for the 2-point conversion, which would put us up, but we lost it.
Who's gonna go over this?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Whoever loses this game, whoever loses this one goes 0-3 on the preseason.
So you're telling me this is a tie? That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, I don't really care about if we win or lose this one, but I just think the Colts are going to lose this one somehow, some way. Honestly.
Okay. I will go 27-21. I'll say Colts just because Sam Ehlinger's looked pretty good. Your quarterback 3. So I think he'll probably be in at some point. And hey, why not? Why not give him a win? Who really cares at the end of the day? But we'll just say Sam Ehlinger continues his hot streak.
Hey, some people say Sam Ehlinger should be QB2 at this point.
Yeah, those people are crazy.
For in his defense, I mean, he has been playing against some of the 2s and the 3s and has thrown for 90% completion percentage, has thrown for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns to no interceptions, posting a almost perfect quarterback record or rating. So at that point, you're kind of like, he's definitely dominating the backups. So, is it possible he looks really good, but that's what the Colts fan base is focused on right now. Not on the starters. It's about whether or not our third string quarterback should be the backup. Some are even saying he should be the starter at this point. That's how drastic the freaking Colts fan base is.
That's why we need regular.
A guy who's playing in the preseason against number 3s and is dominating the number 3s should be the starter for the Colts.
That's why we need regular football. That's why I'm so ready for the end of preseason, because obviously everybody's got an opinion on, who's going to be seeing the most playing time during the preseason. But I swear, man, people get themselves worked up into so much of a fuss over guys who are potentially not going to see the field. I know depth is important, and the argument can be made that, preseason is where you find hidden gems, but damn, dude, I cannot wait for these games to start counting for real. Evan, your prediction for this one?
Yeah, I'll say 23-21 Bucks win. I'll say Ryan Suckup hits a field goal in the last seconds. So I think he's the starter.
Yeah, no Borregales this game?
No, I maybe they might alternate. They might alternate, but I think they'll send Suckup out there to nail the game winner. So
I think
Borregales missed the game winner to open the preseason.
God,
I think Suckup
killed him. That killed him.
No,
I know we kind of played it off like it wasn't that big of a deal.
Ryan Suckup making a 50+ yarder killed him.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Ryan Suckup being as good as he has, and the biggest kick so far the preseason for Borregales being the doink.
I literally think Suckup has missed like a total of in camp and the preseason. Obviously.
Like 2?
He's missed like 2 kicks.
Yeah. He has been damn near perfect, as good as you can ask him to be. And the fact of the matter is, there was a legitimate competition this year. He stepped up to the plate, and Borregales may have to spend another year on the practice squad. We'll see if another team ends up claiming him, if he does go on waivers. But I don't know. Cuts are coming up here soon after the preseason game, so we'll keep you updated on that and, of course, much more. Let me get my prediction, though, as far as Saturday night goes. I'm taking Tampa Bay, only because I know it doesn't matter, but it would be unfortunate to watch them go 0-3, especially with Brady out there, because they went 1-2 last year, and the only game that they
won the final one.
Right. The only game that we looked good in was the Houston Texans game, where Brady was out there and played pretty damn good as well. So maybe we'll see him move the ball, start throwing to his guys. I'd like to see that connection with Julio Jones open up a little bit on that first drive. This is going to be his first chance to throw to Julio in a game day situation. Julio has looked awesome in camp. I know it's always, easy to hype guys up during the training camp period, but if we see some good productivity Saturday night with him on the offensive side of the ball, it gets me that much more excited for week 1 against Dallas, where Chris Godwin probably isn't going to play. I don't know. He's been wearing a non-contact jersey this week. He did not practice yesterday, which means he's probably not going to play. So I wouldn't expect to see him out there, but maybe a couple of extra targets for Julio Jones. Mike Evans still dealing with the hammy, probably not going to play.
He'll play.
You think so?
Yeah, he was back at practice. He'll play.
Okay, hell yeah.
Russell Gage wasn't at practice, so I wouldn't expect Gage.
Yeah, that's the only guy that kind of sucks we didn't get more of a look at in this preseason. I thought he would get a lot of reps, but the pressure is certainly going to be on once he does return to practice and get ready to go for week 1 against Dallas. Final score.
Let's preface this with all these scores. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know it doesn't matter. Just for the sake of weirdness, I'll go 21-18. I don't know how they end up with 18 points.
I wanted to do a weird score.
Yeah. It seems like that's where you see these the most. So I'll go Tampa Bay. 21-18 is your final score in this
5-2. 5-2. Both teams are going to get a safety, and then
it'll be a safety, all tied up at 2, and then a game-winning field goal at the very end. We'll see 0 offense this game. Oh man! But ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Want to send a big old thank you to our friends from Bring the Juice for jumping on and making time with us this week. It seems like it's always a classic game when the Bucs and Indy face off. Unfortunately, it's not in the regular season this year, but I'm grateful we still got to talk to you guys. This is really our first guest appearance of the new league year, so thank you for joining us, man.
Absolutely. It was fun being with you guys.
So I know that a lot of our listeners probably aren't Colts fans, but I promise you their content is worth checking out. They've been getting some kick-ass player interviews recently. I saw you guys interviewed good buddy of mine, Isaiah Rodgers. Excited to watch him and his development this year. I got to ask before we wrap up, what are your expectations for him? Because he's what, cornerback 3, cornerback 4 going into this year?
Just to preface this, Isaiah Rodgers is to Rhett what Scotty Miller is to Derek.
Exactly, dude. I mean, every
Okay.
day at practice, I
Gotcha.
used to watch him run circles around everybody. We went to the same high school. I used to watch him play at Blake and all of that stuff. Yeah, guy is just a freak athlete. And I remember I said on this very podcast all the way back when he was still playing at UMass, I said, folks, you need to watch out. This kid, Isaiah Rodgers, he's a stud. I mean, literally one of the most athletically gifted dudes I've ever witnessed in my life. And he's like 5 foot nothing.
Yeah, he's 5 foot. I think he's all of like 5'10". That's
Yeah.
it. Like, I mean, he's not any taller than that. So I think he's actually like shorter than me, and I'm 5'11". So I mean, it's crazy to think about. But I think he's actually corner 2. You know, yes, most Colts Nation, and yes, Cody and I ourselves, we would say he's corner 2. Now, you know, we talk about Kenny Moore being on the roster as well, but you know, Kenny is more of that inside corner. You know, we're talking more specifically outside. So he's outside corner number 2. Now, he's probably going to share some time with Brandon Faison, who was with the Raiders last year with Gus Bradley. You know, it all depends on how their system works. But Isaiah Rodgers, in both of our eyes, is cornerback number 2.
I think regardless of how it shakes out on the depth chart, he's going to get a lot of playing time. So it doesn't really matter to me kind of if he's 2, if he's 3, whatever you call it, or 4, however you look at it. I think regardless, all 4 of these corners are going to get good run this year. And that's very helpful, I think, just for a depth standpoint and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, we love Isaiah Rodgers. We really feel like he, you know, last year he broke out. I think he actually had an interception in that Tampa Bay game.
He
sure did.
He picked off
Yeah.
Brady, and then he almost took the kick return back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's still your main returner too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he does.
guys.
He does the kickoffs typically.
Yeah, guy's just a stud, man. I am a huge Isaiah Rodgers fan. I was
So are
pissed.
we.
I mean, I was pissed when he picked off Brady, but after about 10 seconds, I was like, all right, dude, you know, he is certainly a Tampa legend around these parts, and I'm glad that he is thriving in the NFL because the guy certainly deserves it. But thank you guys once again for making the time for us today. It's always a pleasure talking some ball with you. And folks, like I said, go check out their YouTube channel, Bring the Juice, and I believe you guys also put out to audio outlets as well.
Yep.
Awesome. And social media too. I know you're both on Instagram, Twitter, all of that good stuff. Do you want to plug anything before we wrap up here?
Go for it, Derek.
Well, you can find Cody and I on Twitter. I don't even remember your handle, Cody. You're gonna have to tell
okay.
yours specifically.
Sure. At CP Felger 55 is mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I forget his every freaking time because his email is different than his IG. But mine is Derek_Larger. You can follow the podcast Twitter at BTJ Pod, and obviously we're on YouTube or anywhere that you guys watch podcasts at Bring the Juice Colts Podcast.
I'll make sure I hook up with you guys on social media after the show as well. I know I follow both of you. I just don't know if it's for my personal account just yet, but we'll make that happen. As far as our listeners, you can check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show and, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_Daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What you got this week?
I just put out something about an hour ago, right before we went on, about just some players to watch for tomorrow night's game. So if you're listening to this before the game, go ahead and check that out and read up on it.
Last but not least, you can find myself on Instagram and Twitter at Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that is our show. It's the final game preview of the preseason. Thank God. I cannot wait for this year's preseason to be over. But folks, football, I mean, we've been saying football's back for the past month and a half, but like it doesn't get any more back than this. The next game preview we have for you will be in a couple of weeks from now when we preview the opening game of the year for Tampa Bay against the Dallas Cowboys playing over there in Jerryland. Should be a good one. And I know it's a rib. I know people were expecting it earlier this week, but our season prediction show is going to be coming. I swear to you, it's going to be coming up. We've been teasing it for like 3 weeks saying, yeah, it'll be next week. It'll be the week after that. But I promise you, stay tuned. We should be doing that show within the next week. We're also going to be kicking off our mailbag series with former Buccaneers quarterback Sean King, so keep an eye out for that. Should be a really good season. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish, and our special guest from the Bring the Juice podcast. We truly appreciate your guys' support, getting ready for an exciting year of football. We'll talk to you next time. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.